It is 11:45 p.m. on a Friday night. You step out of Sinchon Station, exit 3, and the blinding neon of the city immediately assaults your retinas. This is the soul they sell on the brochures, the glittering, restless metropolis. The pavement is a sea of university jackets, intertwined hands, and the flushed faces of people young enough to still believe they own the world. Across the street, the barbecue joints are packed shoulder to shoulder. The air is thick with the smell of roasting pork belly and the sharp, chemical sweetness of cheap fruit soju. But you are not here for the romance. You learned a long time ago that the vibrant, neon-lit dream of the expatriate is just a thin layer of paint over a very heavy, very cold steel frame. You walk past the crowds, past the cosmetic stores pushing sheet masks into the hands of tourists, and you turn down a narrow alleyway. You are looking for the basement. You push through the heavy glass doors of a PC Bang. The transition is violent. 1 second, you are in the chaotic, overstimulated center of youth culture. The next, you are submerged in a cavernous, dimly lit sanctuary of isolation. The air down here is different. It is heavy, stagnant, smelling of artificial cheese dust, instant ramyun, and the unmistakable sour scent of deep, chronic exhaustion. You walk down the aisle of glowing monitors. It is packed, but there is no conversation. Hundreds of faces are bathed in the pale blue light of their screens, entirely disconnected from the bodies sitting mere inches away from them. You find your usual spot, booth 41. You sit down, sinking into the oversized leather gaming chair. You load your time onto the machine, W1,200 for an hour. It is cheaper than sitting in an all-night cafe. It is warmer than sitting on a park bench. And for many of the people in this room, it is much more spacious than the claustrophobic 3-pyong Goshiwon rooms they rent for $350,000 a month. You glance to your right. Booth 42. He is here again. He is 28, maybe 29. You see him here almost every Friday. He wears the same oversized black hoodie, the strings pulled tight, creating a visual barrier between him and the rest of the universe. He is not playing a game. On a Friday night, in a room built for digital escapism, his screen is filled with a massive, soul-crushing Excel spreadsheet. You watch him out of the corner of your eye. He is updating his specs. That is what they call it here. Your specifications. Like you are a machine rolling off an assembly line, needing the right components to be deemed functional by society. You read the columns on his screen. His TOEIC English score. His Level 1 computer literacy certificate. His Korean history proficiency test results. His volunteer hours. The name of his university. His GPA. He highlights a cell in red. He was rejected again. This makes the 4th corporate interview failure this year. You know this because you have watched his posture deteriorate week by week. When you first moved to this country, you thought the stress was just academic. You thought it ended with the Sunhung, the infamous 9-hour university entrance exam that paralyzes the entire nation for a day. You thought once these kids got into college, they could finally breathe. You were entirely wrong. Getting into the university is just the right to enter the actual bloodbath. You sit there, staring at your own empty screen, thinking about the sheer, suffocating velocity of this country. You are looking at a society that modernized faster than the human soul could adapt to. Anime. That is the sociological term for it. You read it once in a book by Emil Durkheim, but you never truly understood it until you lived in Seoul. Enemy happens when a society changes so violently, so rapidly, that all the old rules evaporate before the new rules can be written. Think about the geography of time here. The grandfather of the boy sitting next to you likely grew up walking on dirt roads, surviving the absolute devastation of a brutal war. His father likely built the physical infrastructure of this miracle, trading his youth to corporate conglomerates in exchange for the promise of lifetime stability. But then 1997 happened, the IMF crisis. The country went bankrupt. Overnight, the social contract was violently shredded. The promise of lifetime employment vanished into the winter air. Millions were laid off. The pride of the father became the humiliation of the unemployed. And now, the boy in booth 42 is sitting in the wreckage of that broken promise. He is living in a hypermodern, trillion-dollar economy, but he is still bound by the ancient crushing weight of collective honor. In the West, when you fail alone. You brush yourself off, you change careers, you move back in with your parents, and it is a personal hurdle. Here, failure is not individual. It is collective. Centuries ago, entire villages would pool their money to send one scholar to the capital to take the imperial exams. If he passed, the village thrived. If he failed, he brought deep, unbearable shame to everyone who invested in him. The imperial exams are gone, but the ghost of them haunts every single cubicle in this city. The boy next to you is not just trying to get a job at Samsung or Hyundai to buy a nice car. He is trying to validate the extreme financial sacrifice of his parents. He is trying to justify the millions of won spent on Hagwon night classes. He is trying to avoid the absolute terrifying condition of social death. To lose face here is to cease to exist. You watch him lean forward. He rests his forehead against the edge of the desk. His hands are buried in his hair. The tension radiating from his booth is physically uncomfortable. He is trapped in the perfect storm. You think about the expats who compare Korea to its neighbors. They say Japan is also lonely. They say China is also competitive. But it is different here. In China, the Cultural Revolution wiped the slate clean, replacing ancient community structures with state ideology. In Japan, the modernization started a century ago, giving the culture time to slowly absorb the shock of capitalism. But Korea compressed centuries of evolution into 3 decades. The ancient Confucian demand for absolute filial piety was directly bolted onto a hyper-capitalist, dog-eat-dog corporate structure. The result is a society where you are expected to be as ruthless as a Wall Street banker, while remaining as obedient as a feudal servant. And if you cannot be both, you become a burden. A young part-time worker approaches your aisle. He looks to be about 20 years old. He is wearing a uniform vest that is slightly too large for him. He sets a steaming bowl of instant shin ramyun and a cold can of Chilsung cider on the desk of booth 42. The transaction is entirely silent. No words of greeting, no acknowledgement. The worker turns and vanishes back into the dim corridors of the PC Bang. The boy next to you slowly lifts his head. He reaches for the wooden chopsticks. He splits them apart. He does not eat immediately. He just stares at the red broth, the steam rising up and fogging the bottom of his glasses. You look away, feeling like you have intruded on something deeply private. You pull up a browser on your own screen. You have nowhere to be. You have no family waiting up for you in this time zone. You came to this country looking for an adventure, but lately you just feel like a ghost observing other ghosts. You're surrounded by 10 million people in this city. You're constantly connected. Your phone is loaded with Kakao Talk, Instagram, and a dozen delivery apps that can bring you anything you desire at 3 in the morning. Yet, you have never felt more isolated in your entire life. You stand up. You need a break from the blue light. You walk toward the smoking room at the back of the facility. It is a glass box, heavily ventilated, built to keep the vice contained. You step inside. The ventilation fan works desperately to clear the air. A moment later, the door opens again. It is him. The boy from booth 42. He steps into the glass box. He pulls a single cigarette from a crumpled pack of Mevius. He places it between his lips, but as his hands search his pockets, you watch the realization hit him. He forgot his lighter at his desk. He stands there for a moment, staring at the floor. It is a tiny, insignificant problem, but you can see the sheer exhaustion in his posture. It is just one more thing that is not going right. You reach into your coat pocket. You pull out a cheap plastic convenience store lighter. You extend your hand, offering it to him. He looks up. His eyes meet yours. They are dark, heavily bagged, and completely void of any youthful light. He takes the lighter. He dips his head in a shallow, silent bow of gratitude. He ignites the flame. He takes a long, deep draw, holding the smoke in his lungs for what feels like an eternity. He hands the lighter back to you. "Thank you," he says in quiet English. "You're welcome," you reply. You stand there together in the glass box, two entirely different worlds, standing shoulder to shoulder in the middle of the night. You do not ask him about his spreadsheet. You do not ask him about his interviews. You do not offer him empty, hollow advice about how things will eventually get better. You just share the quiet space. You look through the glass wall of the smoking room out into the massive sea of monitors. You see hundreds of other young men and women. Most of them are actually gaming now. They are playing League of Legends. They are playing Valorant. They are deep into StarCraft matches. The media always calls it an addiction. The older generation calls it a waste of time. They say this generation is weak, that they lack the grit of the people who rebuilt the country from the ashes. But standing here, watching the glow of the screens, you finally understand. They are not addicted to the violence of the games. They are not trying to waste their lives. They are seeking refuge. They are fleeing to the digital world because it is the only place left where the rules still make sense. In a video game, if you grind for 10 hours, you level up. If you study the mechanics, you win. If you put in the effort, the system rewards you fairly, immediately, and without prejudice. The virtual world offers a pure, untainted meritocracy. The real world outside these basement doors broke that promise a long time ago. Outside, you can study for 20 years. You can sacrifice your sleep, your health, and your youth, and you can still be cast out into the cold because of a bad economy, a biased recruiter, or the simple misfortune of not being born into the right family. These kids are not hiding from reality. They are hiding from anonymity. They are surviving the only way they know how, by finding a world that still makes sense, even if they have to pay W1 $200 an hour to rent a seat inside of it. The boy finishes his cigarette. He crushes it in the metal ashtray. He gives you one final subtle nod, and he pushes the heavy glass door open, stepping back out into the blue light. You stay in the booth for a moment longer. You think about the bridge over the Han River. You think about the emergency SOS phones mounted on the railings. You think about the elderly women pulling cardboard carts through the financial district, entirely invisible to the men in tailored suits walking past them. You realize that a society can build the fastest internet in the world. It can erect the tallest towers, and it can export its culture to every corner of the globe. But if it leaves its people behind in the process, if it strips away the safety net of community and replaces it with nothing but a brutal, unforgiving ledger of success and failure, the towers are just beautiful tombstones. You step out of the smoking room. You walk back down the aisle. You pass booth 42. The boy is back in his chair. The spreadsheet is still open. He has his hands on the keyboard, his face pale in the monitor's glow, preparing to write another line of code into the program of his life, desperately hoping that this time society will not return an error. You sit back down at booth 41. You look at your own blank screen. You listen to the heavy, suffocating silence of a room filled with 100 people. And for the first time since you arrived in this city, you do not feel the urge to go outside. You just sit there in the dark, finding a strange, cynical comfort in the shared isolation. That wraps it up for today. The story you just heard is fiction. But if you've ever lived alone in a foreign country, you know that the loneliest moments aren't when you're sitting in an empty apartment. They're when you're surrounded by millions of people who are all quietly drowning in the exact same way. If this one hit different, drop a comment and tell me which part stayed with you. I've got more stories like this coming, so hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.